Have you noticed the weather's been a little off lately? Like seriously out there.
Oh, yeah.
Well, today we're going to dive into a potential climate shift that could make even the wildest weather we've seen look like nothing.
Mm.
We're talking about the collapse of the AMOC.
Oh, wow.
And I think most of our listeners probably already know about the AMOC, the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation.
Right.
But just to recap, it's basically like this giant conveyor belt in the ocean, bringing warm water up from the tropics towards Europe.
Exactly.
But what happens if this conveyor belt just stops working? What if it collapses?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, I think a lot of people just think, oh, Europe might get a little colder,
Right.
but it goes so far beyond that. We're talking about potentially massive changes to ecosystems, global economies, even migration patterns.
So can you kind of break that down for me? Like,
Yeah.
what would an AMOC collapse actually look like, especially for Europe? Not just like, oh, it's going to be a bit chilly. Like real-world impacts.
Okay, so imagine northern and middle Europe. Places like Germany, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, they would be in for, colder winters. But even with, some background warming from climate change, you're still going to see these wild temperature swings. So it's not just about a gradual cooling, it's about this unpredictable, chaotic weather.
Wow.
And that impacts everything. Think about agriculture, energy consumption. I mean, the crops they rely on now, they might not be viable anymore. And when you get those extreme winters, you're going to have much higher energy demands, which could, unfortunately, lead to more reliance on unsustainable energy sources just to meet those needs.
That's pretty scary to think about. And it's easy to think of this as just a European problem, but what you're saying is the impacts would actually be global.
Oh, absolutely. The AMOC plays a huge role on a global scale, and one of the major things it influences is the Intertropical Convergence Zone.
Okay.
Now, that's the area near the equator where the trade winds come together.
Mm.
And this zone basically dictates rainfall patterns all over the world. So if the AMOC collapses, we could see a shift in this zone. You could see a situation where, say, the Amazon rainforest starts to dry up, while on the other side of the world, Australia gets hit with even more intense flooding.
So it's like a domino effect across the entire planet.
Exactly.
Now, remember back in 2019, the IPCC report said that an AMOC collapse was very unlikely. But recently, I've been seeing a lot more research that's saying, hold on, this might be a lot closer than we thought. So what's going on there?
Yeah, there's definitely been a shift in our understanding. While the 2019 IPCC assessment was, I guess you could say, more on the conservative side, the latest research has really changed things.
Okay.
The newer studies are using much more sophisticated modeling, and they're taking into account the real-time observations that we're seeing. And the picture that they're painting is a lot more concerning. In fact, some studies are now saying there's a 50% chance of an AMOC collapse, and that it could happen as early as mid-century, especially if emissions stay high.
Wow, that's a pretty big difference.
Yeah.
And it's not just theoretical, is it? Like, are there actual signs, real-world things that scientists are seeing that suggest the AMOC might actually be in trouble?
Oh, yeah, there are some pretty alarming indicators. For one thing, we're seeing much bigger temperature swings in the Atlantic Ocean. And that type of fluctuation, it's actually consistent with systems that are approaching a tipping point. And another really big factor is all the fresh water that's pouring into the ocean from the melting ice in the Arctic and Greenland. That's messing with the delicate salt balance that the AMOC relies on to function, essentially weakening its driving force.
So it sounds like there are a lot of red flags flashing right now. It's
Yeah.
pretty overwhelming, to be honest. So is there anything that can be done to stop this? Or is it like we're all just stuck on this train that's headed for disaster?
It's definitely serious, there's no doubt about that, but I don't think it's a hopeless situation. I mean, there are organizations out there that are doing some incredible work to make a difference. You've got groups like Planet Wild, for example.
I've heard of them.
They're doing some really amazing things, reintroducing species back into their natural habitats, rescuing endangered animals like pangolins, and documenting everything they do so they can spread awareness and inspire people to take action.
So even with this looming threat of the AMC collapsing, there's still hope, and there's still things that we can do.
Exactly. It's not just about reducing emissions on a global scale. It's also about taking action to protect biodiversity and strengthen the resilience of ecosystems all over the world.
I see. So it's like a two-pronged approach. We need to tackle the root cause of climate change, but we also need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect the planet and help it adapt to the changes that are already happening.
That's exactly right. And I think the situation with the AOC really highlights just how interconnected all of the systems on our planet really are. What happens in the Atlantic Ocean, it doesn't stay in the Atlantic Ocean. It has ripple effects across the globe.
Hmm.
And that's why it's so crucial that we do everything we can to reduce emissions and support the organizations like Planet Wild that are working to protect the planet.
It's definitely a powerful reminder that even small actions can make a difference. Well, this has been a pretty eye-opening deep dive. We've learned about the potential consequences of an AMC collapse, but we've also seen that there's still hope, and there are still things that we can do. If you're interested in learning more about how you can help, be sure to check out Planet Wild's website. They've got a ton of great information and resources. And until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep diving deep.
Keep diving.
Yeah.